Did juvenile theropods help the big adults in the hunts? Hey everyone, Mike here with Prehistoric Magazine. Welcome back to another video. Now, just a quick reminder, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to this channel, I really greatly would appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. I'm currently trying to make my push to get to 20,000 subscribers. If you know anything about YouTube, growth is extremely difficult, extremely slow. So now that that's out of the way, I definitely appreciate your support. I'm glad you're here. But, for as long as I can remember, I've had this image in my head of juvenile tyrannosaurs, with their long, graceful legs speeding out ahead, possibly herding off something like a triceratops or some other type of prey, while the big adults come from behind to take down and maybe possibly deliver the blow. Or, again, take the juvenile tyrannosaur approach, take those animals and they're possibly harassing and bothering an animal, again, let's say triceratops, and pushing it a certain way, only to be ambushed by the big adults. So I've always thought about, families living together, working in coordinated attacks. We've all seen that image online of the juvenile mapusaurs standing right next to the adult mapusaurs. We'd like to think they worked in coordinated efforts, but again, did they really, or did they keep out of each other's way? The more I try and come up with these videos and topics, a lot of times the more confused I actually become. That's why, you guessed it, that comment section is so vital. I really greatly want to hear from you on this topic. But do we think that juvenile theropods helped, big adult theropods? I'm talking about a 5-ton plus theropod. Now, obviously, this example can go towards any type of theropod, maybe a 1-ton adult theropod. But, for the purposes of this, I'm talking about big theropods. So do we think that juveniles helped? Now, if we look at a juvenile T-Rex and we look at an adult T-Rex, they're vastly different animals. The youngsters have long, slender legs and they're built for speed. And that leads a lot of people to believe that, the juveniles hunted different prey in sort of a niche partitioning of, different food sources, and the adults ate other things so as to allow for, because let's face it, a juvenile and an adult theropod are two completely different beasts, structured differently, way different, the skulls, just all of it. They're essentially two different predators. So did they ever work together, or, were they just living apart and these juveniles were looking out for the adults constantly? I mean, think about, the example I think about is young Komodo dragons. If you're a young Komodo dragon, you are not working in coordinated efforts with the adults. In fact, it looks like the adults are probably working to try and take you down. That's why young Komodo dragons spend first few years of their lives up in trees, hiding from the much bigger adults. So again, this question of whether, juvenile theropods helped adult theropods, you can take it in so many different routes. No, it didn't happen, or yes, it did happen, or possibly sometimes it may have happened. Or again, who knows? Maybe adult T-Rexes constantly harassed and bullied juvenile T-Rexes and maybe even attacked and ate them in times of stress. We just don't know, because there's just so many variables and factors that we just don't know. And again, we're trying to piece this together by the fossil record. Now, if you Google juvenile mapusaurs and adult mapusaurs, you're going to get that these animals look like they were buried together during fossilization. So it looks like it points to some type of social structure, like they were all together. Now, were they all together feasting on something, whereas, the adults maybe took something down, or maybe they scavenged something, and here along come the freeloaders, i.e. the juveniles and the young. Now, when I talk about juveniles, obviously we can talk about very, very tiny. We've all seen the Prehistoric Planet, where the very young T-Rex are making that swim across the sea with T-Rex, and they're about to start scavenging on that turtle. Now, that is too small of an animal. When I'm talking about maybe a 2,000-pound juvenile T-Rex, a 2,000-pound juvenile mapu. So I'm talking about an animal that's still a very large animal by today's standards, but obviously not full grown. Now, again, there's so many different variables. That's why I really want to hear from you down in the comment section down below. But who knows, maybe, that scene of, juveniles and adults working together, maybe it would have happened only in the most dire of situations when food was very scarce, i.e., a drought or something like that. And it put enormous stresses on a certain population of theropods, and they had to work together. Maybe in flush times when water is abundant and prey is abundant, maybe juvenile theropods were taking down their own certain prey, and adult theropods were focusing on their own prey. So again, we really don't know. Again, did big theropods, take down prey, and then were they, I'm not going to use the word nice enough, but did they eat and have their fill first, because it probably more than likely a pecking order, and then when they were done, came along for the seconds, the juveniles. So there's so many different scenarios. I like to think that maybe they would have worked together, or another possible scenario that we have is maybe it's possible that certain theropods did work together with their juveniles and other big theropods did not work together with their juveniles. I don't think there's any reason to think that just because, let's say you're a 5-ton theropod, okay? Let's say you're a 5-ton theropod. Let's say you're Torvosaurus or something. I don't think it's accurate to say that every other theropod that fits that size description is going to have the characteristics of that Torvosaur. So maybe there were big theropods that some of them may have worked with the juveniles of their species, whereas there may have been other, theropod dinosaurs that just did not work with the juveniles of their species. And again, they had this type of niche partitioning. Again, the more I talk about these videos, the more I reach out to people in the paleo community on X, the more questions actually circulate in my head. And again, that's why I'm really curious what you have to think on this. Did juvenile theropods push prey in the direction of the adults so as to maybe push them in an area so as to set up an ambush, or did they help in the hunt and takedown of prey? What are your thoughts on this topic? Greatly appreciate the support for this channel. Again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, really would appreciate it. Making the biggest push I can to get to 20,000 subscribers. So thank you for your support. See you in the next video. Take care.